The invasion of Earth was total. Humanity destroyed them swiftly. It was a day like any other. People went about their usual routines. Children walked to school, workers rushed to their offices, and families gathered for meals. The skies were clear and the sun shone brightly over Earth, but everything changed in an instant. Without warning, huge dark ships appeared in the sky. They came from nowhere, gliding silently above the cities. These were no ordinary aircraft. They were massive, towering structures with strange designs. The air grew heavy as the ships descended, casting enormous shadows over the world. The people below stared up in fear and awe. Something was wrong, very wrong. The first attack came without a word. The ships unleashed beams of bright, blinding light that struck the Earth's surface. They targeted major cities: New York, London, Tokyo, Paris, and many more. Buildings exploded into flames, sending plumes of smoke into the air. People ran in panic, trying to escape the devastation. There was nowhere to hide. The alien ships hovered above, relentless and unyielding. The governments of the world scrambled to respond. Military jets were sent into the sky, but they were no match for the alien invaders. The aliens' ships moved too fast, their weapons too powerful. In mere hours, Earth's defenses were crushed. The invaders seemed to have everything: superior technology, overwhelming firepower, and a strategy that left humans struggling to keep up. John Miller was just another person caught in the chaos. He had been at work in downtown New York when the invasion began. He had heard the distant sounds of explosions at first, then the sky darkened and the ground beneath him shook. At first, he thought it was some kind of accident or natural disaster, but when he looked up and saw the ships above, he realized what was happening. With his heart pounding in his chest, John ran out of the building, joining the masses of people fleeing in every direction. The city had turned into a war zone. People screamed as they tried to find cover, while others were trapped in the wreckage of collapsed buildings. The streets were filled with chaos, cars abandoned in the middle of the road, fires raging out of control, and people desperately trying to survive. John didn't know what to do, but he knew he had to keep moving. He found his way to an alley where he paused to catch his breath. The sounds of destruction echoed around him, and he realized that the world as he knew it was ending. Then he saw her. Lisa Thompson was running in the opposite direction, her eyes wide with fear. She was a scientist, someone John had never met before, but in that moment they were both survivors. She saw him standing in the alley and their eyes met. Without a word, she came over to him. "We need to get out of here," she said, her voice shaking. "Do you know where we can go?" John nodded, still in shock. "I don't know, just follow me. I've got some military contacts. They might know what's going on." They ran through the streets, trying to avoid the debris falling from the sky and the firestorms that had broken out all around them. The streets were lined with destruction, and the familiar buildings they had once known seemed unrecognizable now. They didn't speak much as they ran. There was nothing to say. The world had been turned upside down, and they were both just trying to survive. After hours of running and avoiding the alien attacks, they found a small underground bunker hidden beneath a city block. It wasn't much, but it was the only place that seemed safe. As they descended into the dark, cold shelter, John felt a sense of relief wash over him. At least here they could catch their breath and figure out what to do next. Inside the bunker, a handful of survivors had already gathered. They were people from different walks of life: scientists, doctors, engineers, and regular civilians. Some were crying, others sat in shock, unable to process the horrors they had witnessed. John and Lisa were immediately surrounded by them, all of them asking the same questions. "What's happening? Who are they? Are we going to die?" John didn't have answers. He had no idea who the aliens were or what their purpose was. He had seen the destruction firsthand, but he didn't know if there was any way to stop it. Still, he knew one thing: they couldn't just sit here and wait to die. "We need to fight back," John said, his voice firm despite the fear bubbling inside him. The people in the bunker looked at him, some hopeful, others doubtful. Lisa stood beside him, nodding in agreement. "I think he's right," she said. "We may not know who they are or what they want, but we can't just let them take over. We have to find a way to fight." A man named David, an engineer, spoke up. "But how? They're so much more advanced than we are. We can't even get near them without getting shot down." Lisa turned to David. "We've been studying their technology. It's strange, but there might be a way we can reverse engineer it. If we can get close enough to one of their ships, we might be able to figure out how they're doing this." John nodded. That's right, we need to find their weaknesses. Every weapon has one. A woman named Marie, who had been a soldier before the invasion, spoke next. We can't just sit around and wait for the aliens to destroy us. We'll need to organize. We'll need weapons, food, supplies, but most of all, we'll need to stick together. John looked around the room. There was fear in everyone's eyes, but there was also something else. A spark of determination. They weren't giving up. We'll do it, John said. We'll figure out how to fight back, but we need to be smart about it. No rash decisions. We need a plan. Over the next few hours, John and Lisa worked with the survivors in the bunker to come up with a strategy. They didn't have much, just their wits, some basic tools, and the knowledge of the people they'd gathered. But they weren't without hope. Lisa spent most of the time studying the alien technology they de-scavenged from the wreckage. John spoke to the others, organizing them into groups to gather supplies and start fortifying the bunker. Despite the odds, they were starting to believe that they could fight back. Meanwhile, the aliens continued their assault on Earth. Zorath, the alien commander, was in charge of the invasion. He had seen countless planets fall before him, and he was confident that Earth would be no different. But what he didn't count on was humanity's resilience. They might have been small, weak, and scattered, but their spirit was unbreakable. The resistance had begun, and the aliens were about to find out that Earth was not a planet to be conquered easily. As the days passed, John and Lisa grew more determined. They knew they had a long road ahead of them, but they also knew that the battle was just beginning. The aliens had invaded, but humanity had not been defeated. John and Lisa were ready to fight back, and they would not stop until Earth was free again. They didn't have much time. The alien forces were strong, and the situation was dire. But if humanity was going to survive, they needed to act fast. And that meant one thing: they had to destroy the invaders before it was too late. The days after the initial shock of the invasion were filled with uncertainty and fear. John and Lisa worked tirelessly, gathering the few survivors who had managed to escape the destruction. Each day, the situation grew more dire as the alien ships continued to patrol the skies and the world's major cities burned. But deep within the underground bunker, a small group of determined individuals began to form a resistance, unwilling to give in to the alien threat. John's group had begun to grow. Lisa's expertise with alien technology became more and more valuable as she worked alongside engineers and scientists in the bunker. They found pieces of the invaders' weapons and machinery, strange and complicated tech, unlike anything Earth had ever seen. They couldn't understand everything, but they began to see patterns. Slowly, they worked together to reverse engineer the technology, trying to understand how it worked and how to turn it against the invaders. Lisa spent countless hours in the bunker's small laboratory, experimenting with the alien tech. She had managed to connect two pieces of the enemy's weaponry to human power sources. The results were mixed. Sometimes the weapons malfunctioned, sending sparks flying through the air, but there were moments when the tech worked. It was slow progress, but it was progress. Meanwhile, John kept the rest of the survivors occupied. He knew that while Lisa worked on the tech, they needed to prepare for what was coming. The aliens wouldn't wait forever. John spent his days organizing the civilians in the bunker, giving them tasks to help reinforce the defenses and make their limited food and supplies last longer. The bunker, once a place of refuge, was becoming a makeshift base of operations, and the survivors were starting to adapt to their new role in the resistance. David, the engineer, worked alongside Lisa, trying to make the alien weapons more reliable. He had a gift for fixing things, and soon he and Lisa had crafted their first functional prototype, a small but powerful gun that could emit a pulse of energy. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. They had to be patient. Every improvement meant that they were one step closer to having a chance to strike back at the aliens. Every night, John would meet with Lisa and David to discuss their progress. They would plan their next steps, trying to stay ahead of the aliens. They couldn't afford to make mistakes. They knew the invaders had overwhelming firepower, and their ships were almost impossible to track or target. But if they could get close enough, if they could find a way to disable the alien technology, they might just stand a chance. One evening, as John and Lisa sat in the bunker's main room, David entered, his face lit with excitement. "I think we found something," he said, holding up a small device in his hand. Lisa leaned in, studying the object. "What is it?" "It's a transmitter," David said, his voice eager. "It's not like the others. It looks like it's designed to communicate with their ships directly. If we can reverse engineer this, we might be able to tap into their communication system." John's eyes widened. "You're saying we could listen in on them?" David nodded. "Yes, exactly. If we can figure out how it works, we might be able to learn their plans or find a weakness in their defenses." Lisa took the transmitter from David, examining it carefully. "This could be the key to turning the tide," she said, a glimmer of hope in her voice. "If we can disrupt their communications, it could buy us time to strike." Over the next few days, Lisa and David worked together on the device, carefully tweaking it and testing it. They didn't know if it would work, but they had no choice but to try. Every minute they spent on the device was a chance to gain an advantage, and they couldn't afford to waste any time. Finally, after several attempts, Lisa made a breakthrough. The device hummed to life, and a crackling voice came through the speakers. It was in a language none of them could understand, but the transmission was clear. It was the alien commander, Zorath. Lisa quickly scrambled to translate the message, using the few fragments of alien language they had gathered. It wasn't perfect, but she managed to decipher a few key words. "They're planning another wave of attacks," she said. "They're targeting our remaining strongholds. If we don't act now, we'll be wiped out for good." John clenched his fists. "We can't let that happen, we have to act." Lisa nodded. "I've got an idea. We'll use the transmitter to send a false signal. If we can trick their ships into thinking we're still at the bunker, we can get them to focus on the wrong location. It might give us the opening we need." John thought for a moment. "But we don't have much time. We need to be quick. If we're going to do this, we need to be ready to fight." With the transmitter in hand, John led a small group of volunteers to the location they had chosen. The plan was risky, but it was their only shot. They would send a false signal to the aliens, drawing their attention away from the bunker. Once the aliens were distracted, the humans could make their move. The group moved silently through the wreckage of the city, avoiding the alien patrols as best they could. The alien ships still hovered above, scanning the ground with their advanced technology. It felt like a constant presence, watching and waiting for any sign of resistance. John kept a firm grip on his rifle, ready for anything. He couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Every step they took felt like it could be their last, but they had no choice. They had to keep moving forward. The future of Earth depended on them. When they reached the target location, Lisa set up the transmitter. She worked quickly, her hands shaking slightly with the pressure. As she activated the device, she turned to John. "It's ready. We just have to hope it works." John gave a firm nod. "Let's do it." The transmitter hummed to life, and a low buzz filled the air. A moment later, a strange noise crackled through the device. A signal, a false transmission. Lisa had successfully tricked the alien ships into believing that the survivors were still at the bunker. The group held their breath, waiting. It took several long moments, but finally the alien ships moved away. The distraction had worked. John breathed a sigh of relief. "It's done. Now let's get back to the bunker." But just as they turned to leave, the sound of approaching footsteps froze them in their tracks. Alien soldiers. They had been spotted. The group quickly dove for cover, but it was too late. The aliens had already seen them. John raised his weapon, ready to defend himself and the others. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. The aliens advanced, their weapons aimed and ready to fire. But just as they were about to attack, a blast rang out from the distance. Another human group had arrived, reinforcing them. The battle began. John and his team fought fiercely, using the weapons they had managed to craft from the alien technology. The tide of battle shifted. The humans were holding their ground, pushing back the aliens with everything they had. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. As the battle raged on, John looked around. He saw Lisa, her face determined and focused, as she fought beside him. The others in the bunker had joined them, and together they were starting to push the invaders back. This was just the beginning. They had taken their first steps toward reclaiming Earth. And though the road ahead was still uncertain, John knew one thing for sure. Humanity wasn't done fighting. The battle had been hard, but John and his team managed to survive. They had fought the alien invaders back from their small victory, but it was only a taste of what was to come. The resistance was growing stronger, and every day they gathered more people willing to fight for the survival of Earth. Inside the bunker, life had started to settle into a routine. Lisa continued to work on the alien technology with the engineers and scientists, making slow but steady progress. The weaponry was still unpredictable, but they had learned enough to know they could do damage. John, along with his soldiers and volunteers, trained every day, growing better with each passing hour. They practiced stealth, combat, and tactics, preparing for the day they would strike the invaders with everything they had. The small resistance group, now growing larger, had become a symbol of hope. People from all over the world had joined them, refugees from destroyed cities, soldiers who had lost their homes, and scientists eager to find answers. Together, they began to form a plan, working toward one goal, to defeat the aliens and take back Earth. John paced the main command center in the bunker, his mind racing. They had to act fast. The aliens were still everywhere, and their ships continued to patrol the skies, making it nearly impossible to move about freely. But if they could find a weakness, if they could find a way to attack the aliens' central base, the heart of their power, they might have a real chance. "I've been studying their movements," Lisa said, walking over to John, her face serious. "They're focused on one thing, keeping control of their main command center. It's where their fleet is coordinated, where their energy source is located." John looked at her, nodding. "So if we take that down, we take their power away." "Exactly," Lisa said. "If we can get close enough to their central base and destroy their energy core, it will cripple them. But we'll need to be strategic. Their base is heavily guarded." David, the engineer who had been working alongside Lisa, joined them. "We've made some improvements to the weapons, but we need more firepower. We'll have to hit them fast and hard. We can't afford a prolonged fight." John sighed, rubbing his face. "I know, we don't have the luxury of time. We'll need a distraction." "We can create one," Lisa suggested. "We have the transmitter now. If we send out another false signal, it might draw the aliens away from the base just long enough for us to sneak in." John smiled grimly. "I like that idea. We'll need to move quickly and take advantage of the opportunity." The plan was set. They would send a false signal to the alien ships, causing them to shift their focus away from the command center. Once the aliens were distracted, John's team would make their move. The hardest part would be getting inside the heavily fortified base. John gathered his team. He looked around at the faces of the men and women who had chosen to fight alongside him. These were people who had lost everything, who had seen their cities fall, their loved ones taken. But they had come together, united in a single purpose, to reclaim Earth. "We're going to do this," John said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "We may be outnumbered and we may be outgunned, but we're going to take back our world. We fight for everyone we've lost, for everyone who didn't have a chance to fight back. We fight because we are human and we will never stop." The group cheered, their spirits lifted by John's words. They were ready to give everything for this fight. That night, they moved out under the cover of darkness. The alien ships still hovered above, their silent presence a constant reminder of the enemy they were up against. John's team moved swiftly, sticking to the shadows, careful not to be detected. They had to get close to the alien base without alerting the invaders. As they approached the outskirts of the base, they could see the massive walls and the guard towers. Alien soldiers patrolled the area, their glowing eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of trouble. It was a fortress, one that seemed nearly impossible to infiltrate, but they had to try. "Stay close," John whispered to his team. "Move when I move, don't make a sound." They crept forward, the only sounds the soft crunch of gravel underfoot and the distant hum of alien ships in the sky. They had made it this far, but the hardest part was yet to come. David, who had been monitoring the alien communication system, signaled to John. "The false signal has gone out. We've got a window. It won't last long." John nodded. "Let's move." The team rushed forward, sticking to the shadows as much as possible. They had no choice but to stay close, using the cover of the night to avoid detection. Every step felt like a calculated risk, but they pressed on, knowing the future of humanity depended on their success. Finally, they reached the outer wall of the base. There was a small entrance, guarded but just barely. The alien soldiers were distracted by the false signal, giving them just enough time to slip through undetected. Inside, the base was even more imposing. The walls were lined with strange symbols, and the floors hummed with energy. It was clear that this was the heart of the invaders' operation. Everything they had been fighting for was in here. "Where do we go?" Lisa whispered, looking around. David checked his device. The energy core should be in the center. We need to get there quickly. They moved deeper into the base, finding a series of corridors that led to the heart of the complex. Along the way, they encountered alien soldiers, but the false signal had worked. The soldiers were distracted, giving John's team enough time to slip past them unnoticed. When they finally reached the core, they found it, a massive glowing energy source that powered the entire base. It was a sleek alien design pulsing with light. It was clear that this was the heart of their power. "This is it," John said, his voice low. "We destroy this and we cripple them." David worked quickly, setting up the explosives that they had brought with them. It wasn't easy. He had to be precise, calculating every move. The slightest mistake could set off an alarm or worse, trigger a chain reaction that would destroy them all. As he worked, Lisa kept watch, her eyes darting back and forth as she scanned the area for any signs of alien soldiers. They couldn't afford to be interrupted now. Every second counted. "Almost there," David said, his hands shaking slightly as he finished the setup. "We just need to get out of here before it goes off." John nodded. "Everyone move out now." They turned and ran, retracing their steps through the dark corridors of the alien base. They were nearly at the entrance when an alarm suddenly blared, echoing through the halls. The aliens had discovered them. "Move, move, move," John shouted, pushing the team forward. They ran faster, the sound of footsteps behind them growing louder as the aliens closed in. John's heart pounded in his chest as they neared the exit. They were almost there. With one final burst of speed, they burst through the door and into the night. The explosion came moments later, a deafening blast that shook the ground beneath them. The alien base was engulfed in flames, the energy core destroyed. As they ran back to the safety of their hideout, John looked back at the burning base. It was only one victory, but it was a big one. The invaders had been crippled. They had struck at the heart of their power, and the aliens would now have to regroup and rebuild. But John knew this was far from over. The fight for Earth was just beginning, and humanity had shown the invaders that they were not to be underestimated. With each victory, the resistance grew stronger and the aliens' grip on the planet weakened. They had dealt a heavy blow. And the next blow would come even harder. The explosion that tore through the alien base was heard for miles. The fireball shot into the sky, lighting up the night like a second sun. For a brief moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The alien invaders had been dealt a major blow. The central power source was gone, and their control over Earth had been shaken. But the battle was far from over. John and his team made their way back to the safety of the bunker, their hearts still racing from the escape. They had managed to destroy the core, but the mission had come with risks. They had barely made it out alive. Yet, despite the danger, they knew they had struck a significant blow. The invaders were vulnerable now, and the resistance had grown stronger. Lisa, still catching her breath, looked at John. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. "We actually did it." John nodded, though his face was hard. "One victory doesn't win the war. We need to keep pushing." Back at the bunker, the survivors were waiting, anxious for news. When John and his team entered, they were met with a roar of cheers. The group had heard the explosion, and they knew it meant something important. It was a victory, but it was also a signal, a sign that humanity wasn't ready to surrender. "We've hit them hard," John said, his voice steady, "but they're not going to give up easily. We've only just begun." The survivors gathered around, listening intently. John continued, "The aliens will regroup. They'll try to rebuild their power. We need to use this opportunity to strike before they can recover." Lisa stepped forward. "I've been studying the data from the alien base. The technology we've taken from them, there's a way to amplify their weaknesses. We can do more damage if we hit them in the right places." David, the engineer, added, "We know where their supply lines are. We've already hit their power. Now we need to cripple their resources, food, water, and communication. If we take those out, we can weaken them even more." John nodded. The plan was taking shape, and each piece was more dangerous than the last. "We'll split into teams. One will attack their supply lines. The other will target their communication networks. We're going to take everything they have and leave them with nothing." As the survivors prepared for the next phase of their mission, there was a renewed sense of purpose in the air. They were fighting not just for themselves, but for all of humanity. Their enemy was powerful, but they had something the invaders didn't: hope, determination, and a fierce will to survive. The following days were filled with planning and strategy. John's team worked tirelessly, using what little resources they had to gather information about the alien supply routes and communication systems. Lisa and David continued their work with the alien technology, trying to unlock more secrets that could give them an edge. The first strike came quickly. A small team of resistance fighters, led by Marie, a former soldier, infiltrated a major alien supply depot. It was heavily guarded, but Marie and her team were quick and quiet. They sabotaged the equipment, destroyed the food supplies, and left behind nothing but smoke and rubble. The aliens would have to waste time and resources rebuilding what they had lost. Meanwhile, another team, including John and Lisa, set their sights on an alien communication relay station. If they could cut off the alien forces' ability to communicate, it would disorient them and slow their coordination. The team moved in under the cover of darkness, sneaking past patrols and reaching the relay station. Lisa worked quickly, hacking into the alien systems to disable their communication network. Within moments, the relay station was down. The aliens were beginning to panic. They had been unable to stop the resistance, and their own systems were starting to fail. But Zorath, the alien commander, wasn't ready to admit defeat. He gathered his remaining forces, preparing for a counterattack. The next few days were tense. The aliens began to launch desperate strikes against the resistance, hoping to regain control. But the humans were prepared. Every time the invaders came, the resistance fought back with everything they had. The alien ships still hovered above, but they were slower now, their power weakened by the attacks. John knew that the final confrontation was coming. The aliens were regrouping, and they would try to make one last stand. But the humans were ready. They had hit the aliens where it hurt most: their resources, their communications, their power. The invaders were no longer the unstoppable force they had once seemed to be. Earth's defenders had the upper hand. One night, as the resistance gathered for a final meeting before the last push, John stood before the group. "This is it," he said, his voice strong. "We've taken everything from them. Now we finish what we started." The plan was simple. They would launch an all-out assault on the alien command center. Zorath and his forces would be there, ready for the final fight. The humans knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, but they also knew that the aliens had underestimated them from the beginning. "We've fought hard to get here," John said, "and we're going to fight even harder now. We take the fight to them, and we don't stop until they're gone." With the plan set, the team prepared to leave the bunker one last time. They gathered their weapons, made sure their gear was ready, and said their goodbyes. It was hard to think about what might come next, but they knew there was no turning back. The final battle was upon them. The resistance moved out at dawn, a wave of humanity united in one purpose: to free their planet. As they advanced toward the alien command center, they encountered alien forces that tried to stop them. But the humans were relentless. They pushed forward, knowing that this was the moment that would determine Earth's future. The alien command center was surrounded by walls of steel and alien technology. It was the heart of their operation, and they would stop at nothing to protect it. But the humans were ready. They breached the outer defenses and fought their way inside, facing wave after wave of alien soldiers. Lisa worked quickly, using her knowledge of alien technology to disable the power systems inside the command center. David and the others planted explosives in key areas, setting up a chain reaction that would destroy the center once and for all. John and his team fought to hold their ground, pushing the aliens back at every turn. The final moments of the battle were a blur of gunfire, explosions, and chaos. John fought alongside Lisa, knowing that this was the endgame. They had come so far, and they couldn't stop now. The aliens were retreating, and their control over Earth was slipping away. It was only a matter of time before they would be defeated. With one final push, the resistance reached the heart of the command center. The alien forces were broken, their command center destroyed. The alien invaders had no choice but to retreat. Earth had won. The survivors stood in the wreckage of the alien base, breathless but victorious. They had done it. They had taken back their planet. The invaders were gone, and humanity was free. John looked around at the faces of the men and women who had fought beside him. They had all lost something. Some had lost family, others had lost their homes. But they had all found something else, a sense of unity and purpose. They had fought for Earth, and they had won. "We did it," John said, his voice filled with pride. And as they stood together, watching the sun rise over a free Earth, they knew that the future was theirs. The invasion had been total, but humanity had destroyed them swiftly. The war was over and Earth had triumphed.